Hey, BookTube. So I'm going to be recording another installment in my Western Canon reading list exploration. I did the Greek Age about a week ago or a week or two ago. This will be the Latin Age. So the reason why I call it the Latin Age and not just Roman literature, and why I didn't um, separate the two so distinctly, is because there is a lot of Greek authors still to encounter on this list because Greek writers still continued writing as Rome came into power and took over the world, basically, or at least the world as we know it in the West during this time. So I call it the Latin Age because Latin literature, of course, dominated, but we still have other writers or Greek writers to encounter, and so I include those in this Latin Age list to keep it roughly chronological. Um, I'll get right into it because this might take us a while, but just as a preface, one, I don't have any of these books here with me. So I don't have any prompts to show you other than a few books on my e-reader for one particular author, but no other authors. And then I'll go through the list, and I don't really know a whole lot other than the research I did to create this list, because um, I have not read any of these authors, and they're authors I'm going to be encountering, but ones I have not encountered yet. And the other obvious thing is that I'll be reading them all in translation. So none of these, well, it's same with Greeks. I'm reading them all in translation, but um, so all of these will be either in books I've either found used. I do have hard copies of some of them, but none of them are with me here, so I can't show them to you. But I'll just go through them in order and talk about them, what I can say. Hopefully this won't go nearly as long as my Greek video, because the Greek video I knew a lot about what I had read, because I had read most of that list already, but this one I have not read anything. So this is all these authors will be new to me, and it'll be interesting to encounter them as I go through this Latin Age. So the first two authors that I start off this Latin Age are the comedy writers. So start off with Terence, and then we move on to Plautus. And for Terence, I have the Penguin edition. We don't have a whole lot that survives from Terence, and we don't know a whole lot that we know about him as a writer. But the Penguin edition publishes all that we have of him, which I think is like 4 plays or something, or 4 comedies, or maybe it's 6, something like that. Um, and then we got Plautus, who I have the Oxford World Classics edition, which has four comedies. So these authors are not considered as great as the Greek playwrights, but they are the ones that are far more influential. For example, or at least in shaping the genre, and I believe Terence in particular um, would his formatting of comedy would be very influential. For example, for Shakespeare, I think I have that connection correct. So then, yeah, we start off with comedies. The two comedy writers in the Latin Age, and then we move on to history. So we have the Polybius, and Polybius. I have the Penguin abridgment. It's not the whole work that Penguin does, but it's just a history. I don't know a whole lot about it, other than it is an influential history book. I don't know what period he's talking about or what exactly he's going into. I did know this at one point, but I did create this list like 3 years ago, so I won't be able to tell you as much about Polybius now as I maybe would have then, and it's not like I've read Polybius since then. So, but next is Polybius and his history on this list, and I'll be reading it in the Penguin version, which I have a physical copy of. And then next is a landmark author. This is Julius Caesar, and I have the Landmark Caesar volume, which includes his complete works, so like the Gallic War, um, the Civil War, and then it has minor works that may or may not have been written by Caesar, and it's the usual landmark edition that I've talked about before with Herodotus, Thucydides, and Arrian. I guess Xenophon has him too, but I didn't include him on this list, at least for landmark editions. And there are just these big oversized works that include maps and a whole bunch of critical apparatus and essays of context and usually new translations. And they're quite an amazing feat of publishing. And I don't know why, say, like a publisher like Penguin Classics or something hasn't swiped them up and put them in their line, because they are feasts for ancient writing. So I have the landmark edition, which has all I need to read about from the works of Caesar. And then we move on to another big author. We have Cicero. So Cicero is the one author that I do have ebook prompts for. So I'll be reading as much as I can read, as I can tolerate from Cicero, because a lot of Cicero survives, but I don't know how much of it is actually worth writing. And the infuriating thing is that there's no Penguin Classic or Oxford that it collects a huge anthology of his works. Like, for example, Modern Library, I believe, does this big, fat, basic works of Aristotle, which is like 1,500 pages or 1,300 pages. I don't own it, I didn't read it, but you should be able to do a work like that for Cicero, because so much of his work survives. So I'll be showing you what I can or what I want to read. It all depends how I'll get along with him as an author, because he doesn't really have that one or two works that everyone knows or is influential. It seems like Cicero, it's all over the place. Many different of his works influence different parts of, or different I don't know, different schools of thought or whatever. So the one volume here I'm going to show you on my e-reader is the Oxford World Classics edition of his political speeches. This is translated by D.H. Barry. The political speeches includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 speeches, 9 political speeches, and most of them are against Catiline. So, and then there's 2 against Verres, 1 on the command of Gnaeus Pompeius, and then one is for Marcellus, and then Philippic II. I don't know what any of that means, but I'm sure I'll figure it out once I get to this volume. It's very short. It's 9 speeches, doesn't seem like a whole lot, but in a new translation, I don't know how long each of these speeches are. Maybe they're quite long, I don't know. I'm totally new to this Latin Age era of works, but yeah, that's political speeches. Then I have probably the most famous work by Cicero, or at least the most studied work that I know of, the Republic and the Laws. This is translated by Niall Rudd, and another Oxford World Classics edition. I don't think the Laws or the Republic are complete. We're missing parts of the works here, but this is his political thinking, and this is a Oxford translation. I don't know much more of it than that. And then we get into some of his philosophical work here. This is On the Nature of the Gods. This is, who translates this? Will tell me. Translated with an introduction by P.J. Walsh. So P.J. Walsh translates this, and it's his work of philosophy on the gods. And that's it for that edition. But then we move on to my other e-reader, which has the Delphi Classics Complete Works of Cicero. And this has public domain translations in English, all collected under one ebook file. And here I want to read, so as you see, it has this section here, orations, and then it just has this endless list of them all here, all the way up to this section here, which is Rhetoric and Political Treatises. And from this section here, I wanted to read about the composition of arguments, because I believe that was fairly influential in the study of rhetoric throughout the ages. And then I wanted to read some of his defense speeches, which I believe Oxford has a volume out that I don't have yet, a volume of his defense speeches. I might just look at the Oxford edition, look at which 5 they choose, because I think it's 5 defense speeches that they publish, and then just read them in here instead of buying that volume. And then we also have, what is the other one here? Yes, on old age. I have, so Princeton has this line of squat hardcovers of classic Greek and Roman authors, and they like How to Be a Friend or How to Farm or whatever, How to Be Happy, and they're basically just edited works or selected works presenting classical authors to audiences in this little bite-sized hardcover format. I have one of those volumes that I found used. It's the complete On Old Age by Cicero. It's like got a gray dust jacket. It is the complete work because I believe it's fairly short. And the thing with those editions is that they're bilingual. So I do have, it does have the Latin on the facing page. And lastly, the book that I'm not entirely sure about is a Pseudo-Cicero work. So it's not a work by Cicero, but it's, or no, before I talk about this work, I want to mention the letters to Attekus, because Cicero wrote a ton of letters, and including letters to a friend of his called Attekus. And I've heard Penguin does actually, I think, a 2-volume set or maybe a 1-volume work of the letters of Attekus that is out of print. I have not found that one used yet. I would like to if I ever find it, but that's unlikely. So I'll just read them in this e-copy here. Does it say who translates them? Evelyn Shuckborough. Evelyn S. Shuckborough. And there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. My goodness. Looks like there's a ton of letters here. Okay. 16 books of letters. So I won't be reading all of that. Maybe it would be nice to have a copy of the Penguin version, because I'm certain they abridge it. I don't think they include the entire correspondence. Because I don't need to read the entire correspondence. And I'm not totally enthusiastic about letter collections to begin with, but getting Cicero writing in the time of his day and just learning about what was on his mind and what concerned him and whatnot seems like an appropriate inclusion into a Western canon reading list. And then we go on to the Pseudo-Cicero work. That used to be attributed to Cicero, but is no longer considered his work. It's to the tribute of Publius Sulpicius Rufus. I'm not up on my Roman names either, as you can tell. The Latin has it as Rhetorica ad Herennium. It is a textbook basically on rhetoric, and it was very influential in the Middle Ages. And I don't know how long it is, but I'd like to at least give it a try, because I did read Aristotle's book on rhetoric. I wasn't very impressed by it, but then again, I probably didn't really understand it a whole lot. And rhetoric was a very influential form of study throughout the Middle Ages and whatnot. Or not even just Middle Ages, but in the Latin Age too. So I feel like it's at least important to get a toe in the door and see what's up, and see what it was all about, and what I could learn from it, even though, as you can tell with all my pronunciations, my rhetoric is not very good. But anyways, moving on, next is the works of Sallust. I believe he writes about the Catullus conspiracy and something else. The Penguin volume has all of the works that survive of his in one volume, which includes the Catullus conspiracy, which Cicero, of course, was involved in. I don't know a whole lot else about that, other than that's next on my list. And then next is Lucretius, who wrote a book of poetry called, or a big long poem called The Nature of Things. I don't have a copy of that one yet. I don't know which translation I really wanted to go for. Penguin and Oxford, of course, do translations. But if you have any translations that you suggest, feel free to recommend a translation down below in the comments. But yeah, Lucretius, it's a poem, but it's also a work of philosophy, basically. And I believe it's considered like the strongest, or at least it's an argument for Epicureanism, which I did talk about in my last video on the Western canon. So, because I will be reading some Epicurus. And then the next is a maybe. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to be reading this. This is Catullus, his poems. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to read this. I know Catullus, of course, is very influential, but then again, I'm not totally up on my poetry, and poems in translation like this, I'm not entirely sure how much I'm going to actually get from it. Unless there's like a really good translation that is recommended to me, I might skip this because my list is quite long enough, and I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how I feel when I get to this point, because I do have a lot of big authors. Like I have Cicero to go through. I've got Polybius and Julius Caesar, and then also the next few authors here. So next is Horace. I will be reading Horace because I have a volume of his Odes and Epodes that I found used. I don't know who the translator is, but it is not Oxford or Penguin, I don't think. But I do have a copy of that, and I might as well just read it, see what it's about. It's not terribly long, and I don't know what to expect from reading Horace in translation, but I can't imagine that it will be all that informative. I don't know. I'm rather skeptical about these kind of very lyrical short poems in translation. I'm a lot more forgiving and a lot more interested in big poems like Homer or Odyssey, or like Homer's Odyssey or the Iliad or Lucretius, all in translation. I'm a lot more interested in that than, say, shorter poetry in translation, like Catullus or Horace. And then next we have another massive author. We have Livy. So for Livy, he wrote this enormous history of Rome from the beginning to his current age. A lot of it doesn't survive, but then again, a lot of it does. I would say maybe 1/3 of it survives, and then 2/3 of it doesn't. But I could be wrong about that. I know just what we do have that survives. Oxford divides it into 4 volumes, the works of Livy. So we have the first 10 books they do in 2 volumes. So books 1 to 5 are in 1 volume in Oxford, and then 6 to 10 are in another volume. And I believe books 11 to 20 we don't survive. So we don't have any of that other than probably fragments, but I don't know if those are translated in these Oxford volumes. And then in Oxford, they continue with books 21 to 30 in a volume of its own, which I do own as a physical book, and then books 31 to 45 I have as a physical book in Oxford. So there's 4 volumes of Livy to get. I have 2 that I own, and the other 2 I would have to acquire. Or I might just read those in a public domain translation, and then just read the Oxfords that I do own. But we'll see about that. Yeah, so Livy, that's a big undertaking right there, 4 volumes to read. But I'm looking forward to it. I've heard a lot of good things about Livy, and yeah, he's a very influential historian. And then we move on to Virgil, of course. Can't go without Virgil. The Aeneid, of course, is one that you have to read. I have the Penguin Classic Deluxe edition, which is the Robert Fagles translation, but I also have a mass market of the Mandelbaum translation, which I might read. Or I also have just a regular Penguin Classic edition of the Aeneid, whose translation I don't know. I don't think it's Fagles. because I wouldn't get a repeat translation. So it's a different translation altogether. So I'll have 3 translations to choose from. The only problem with the Mandelbaum mass market is that there's no notes in that one because it is a mass market form. So I might choose one with actual notes to it as my first read. And then we have his Georgics or Georgics, Georgic, Georgics or something. I don't know. I think this is his rustic poems. It's either that or the Eclogues. I mixed the two up, but I'll be reading both of them. They're shorter poems of his. One or the other, I forget, or maybe both of them are like rustic poetry. So like, which would become quite influential by in the Middle Ages with people, or it seemed like the I don't know, the way a poet would transform themselves, where they would grow into a mature poet, would be to start off writing um, like rustic poetry, poetry about like shepherds and fields and shepherdesses and whatever, and nymphs and whatever. It's like rustic poetry. Um, and then once they have that work under their belt, then they would move on to their grand epic. So we have, for example, in England we had Edmund Spenser and Sir Philip Sidney, who do rustic poetic works, and then they would move on to their more grander work. Though I don't believe Sir Philip Sidney, um, his Arcadia is not a work of poetry, I don't think, but it is quite rustic. Um, Uh, but then, of course, Edmund Spenser moved on to The Faerie Queene after he did his rustic poetry, which is more of a granular epic. And then, so with Virgil, we have his shorter poetry, the Eclogues, the Georgics, and then we have the Aeneid. Um, and then we have another grand Russian, or not Russian, Roman author. We have Ovid. I have his Metamorphoses. I have, I think, 3 different translations. I have an Indiana University Press edition, which has an older translation from, I think, the 50s or 60s, and then it has then it has like half the edition is critical notes written by a scholar. So it was basically a scholar in the past, say, 15 years, taking an older translation and then writing a ton of notes to it. Um, so I might read that one because having a ton of notes for this work seems like the way to go. But I also have, I think, I have a prose edition from Penguin, an older translation for which is translated by a woman, but whose name escapes me. It's like Mary something, I think. Um, so maybe a prose translation would be a good introduction to Ovid. But then I also have Horace Gregory's translation in the Signet Classic paperback, which is more of a poetical work. It's more not so much trying to convey, or not so much trying to convey the story to you. It's actually trying to convey the poetry to you. Um, so that would seem like a work that would not be for a beginner. I would like to read both the other 2 translations before I read Horace Gregory's, in order to get to know Ovid through these other translators, and then try to um, grapple with Horace Gregory's poetical version, where he does, I think, take poetic liberties, but he does that in order to capture the poetic beauty of Ovid's verse. Um, and then I also want to read his love poems because Ovid's love poems were, um, fairly erotic but fairly popular at the time too. There are other versions of his poems that I could get, like there's the Fasti, which I don't think I'll be reading. That'll be a maybe. His poems of exile, and then there's the Heriods or Heroids, I think is how you pronounce it. But I don't know a whole lot of these, how influential they were. Maybe I should read them. But those are maybes. And then we move on to Cassius Dio, who has a Roman history book. But he is a maybe. I don't know if I'll be getting to him because I'm not entirely sure how influential he was or how prominent of an author he is. it seems like he more survived because of just random chance, more than, say, because he is a noteworthy author of this time, unlike Livy or, say, Polybius. So I don't know if I'll be reading Cassius Dio. I might circle back once I've gone through the essentials of the Latin age, and then come back to him some other time. And then we come to another major author. We have Seneca. I actually do have prompts for Seneca, I think. We have Seneca. So we have a ton of his letters that survive, and a ton of his essays and dialogues, and then we also have tragedies that he wrote. Let's see if I can find the editions that I have here on my e-reader, because I have all of his works, or at least a lot of his works on e-readers here. And yeah, here we go. So Chicago University Press does a complete works of Seneca, but they're in many different volumes. So one volume here that I have is his Letters on Ethics. They all have this cover to it, where it's Seneca written in 2 letters. So we got Seneca. But this is his Letters on Ethics. This is translated by Margaret Graver and A.A. Long. And then we move on to, and they're quite long, like there's a lot in these volumes. And then we have his Happiness and Hardship volume. I believe this includes letters and dialogues and essays. So it's like and this has like 5 different translators in the bottom here. What is all included in this edition here? Does it give me a table of contents? No, it doesn't. Table of contents. The consolation to Marcia, consolation to Helvia, consolation to Polybius, on the shortness of life, on the constancy of a wise person, on the tranquility of mind, on leisure, on the happy life, and on providence. So just a number of different works here. And then we also have then I also have the collection of his tragedies. This is volume 1 that they include in their line. How many is here? We have Medea, Phoenician women, Phaedra, the Trojan women, Octavia, and I think that's it. So that's what? 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so 5 of his tragedies here. 5 of his tragedies. Those are the only volumes of Cicero or Seneca that I do have. I don't know if I need any more than that, especially since that's quite a lot already. So I might just leave it there for Seneca. But Chicago University Press does publish his entire works in translation if you're interested in reading Seneca. I know he's like a stoical Dubro author that people like to read, but that's not why I'm going to his works for. Then we have a bit of an oddity that I will be reading. This is Lucan, Lucan. This or Lucian. This is his Civil War, and his Civil War is basically an epic poem on Julius Caesar, I believe. And it's not very influential from what I understand, or at least it isn't anymore. I'm only going to be reading it because I found a used Oxford World Classics edition at a used bookstore, and I have a copy of it, so I might as well read it. And but I don't know a whole lot about it, other than that it's not considered like a brilliant work or anything. It's just one of the works of poetry that happened to survive, and it's a work on the Civil War as pertaining to Julius Caesar, I believe. That's my impression, anyways. And then we come to another maybe author, which is basically I'm not going to be reading this author, but I have him on my list as like an author to come back around and to maybe read once I've read all these works. I have him as a maybe. This is Pliny the Elder, and this is I have his natural history here. Pliny the Elder apparently was quite prolific. He wrote a ton of works about everything, and it just happens to be random chance that the one work of his that survives is his natural history. And so, yeah, That's a maybe, and then we move on to an actual guarantee author. This is an author that I will be reading. This is the Josephus. Josephus. I want to read his two major works, which titles escape me at this moment, but he's got two major works of history. He's a Jewish writer from, I think, the 1st century AD, who wrote, for example, about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, of the Jewish temple. The Romans destroyed the temple, which was a huge pivotal moment in Jewish history, and also very much, you could say, is very important in the history of Christianity too, because you have this move from Old Testament Jew religion to the introduction of Christianity and the influence of Christianity after the destruction of the temple. But anyways, I'll be reading the two major works from Josephus. Sorry that I don't have the names here. I just have the complete works listed here. And then we have Juvenal's Satires. I don't know if I'll be reading this. This will be a maybe. Again, it's short work in translation, or like short poetry in translation, so I don't know how well that works. And then we have Quintilian Institutio Oratio. This is another work of very influential oration, or like rhetoric, and so I want to give it a try and see what it's about. And then we have, of course, Plutarch's Lives. I have the entire ebook edition of Bernadette Perrin, who did the old Loeb Classical Library edition back in like the 20s, and it's in public domain, at least in my country currently, so I have the entirety of that translation. Plutarch's Lives is basically an essay on a Greek historical figure, and then of a Roman historical figure, and then an essay that compares them, similarities and whatnot. And that's a huge work that I wanted to read. If I don't read it in the Bernadette Perrin translation, then I'll be reading it in the Dryden translation, which is the edition that you can get everywhere as a complete edition, other than the bastardized versions that Oxford and Penguin put out. But then for Plutarch, he also has a collection of essays that I would like to read, just essays about all kinds of things. I'm not entirely sure what is all in there, but I know that his essay collection is a must-read as well. And then I was going to go on to Pliny the Younger. So this is, I think, the nephew of Pliny the Elder, and Pliny the Younger is famous for his letters. This Penguin Classic does a volume of Pliny the Younger, so this will be, I have him as a maybe. I don't know if I'll be reading his letters. I might just skip him and go towards the essentials, more of the essentials, which includes the next author on my list, who is Tacitus. So Tacitus has 3 works that I know of that I want to read, but I might just read 2 of them to begin with. And the first one is just his regular histories. That's the Histories of Tacitus in the Oxford World Classics edition. I just have that as a suggestion. I don't know which translation I'll actually be reading this in. I just know it as the Histories. I don't know if there's an actual official title to it. But then there's the Annals of Tacitus, which I do have in an Oxford edition, I believe. And I don't know who translated it, but that's the Annals of Tacitus. And then there's also the Agricola and Germany, which is the title of the Oxford edition. I have that one as a maybe, because I think that's a bit of a minor work for Tacitus, unless no one in the Latin age has a minor work because of how little survives of all of these writers. But I'll be reading what is called the Histories here, and then also the Annals of Tacitus. And then his book on Agricola and Germany will just be a maybe. It'll be a work that I'll come back to some other time. And then another must-read for me is the Epictetus work. Epictetus was a Stoic philosopher. Not a whole lot of his stuff survives, and so the only edition that I could find was or at least an edition of his actual work, other than, say, interpretations, is the volume put out by Oxford, which has his discourses, a handbook, and then fragments. And so I'll be reading that. I think it's a short volume, should be easy to get through. And then next we have Apolybius. This is one of the what is called like a Latin author, or Latin novelist, or Latin novel. It's called The Golden Ass, and I have 3 different translations of this. I have the old Penguin Classic edition. I think it's done by Michael Grant. I could be wrong about that, but it's an old Penguin edition. And then I have the newer Penguin edition. I don't know who the translator is. And then I also have the Oxford edition, which I think is also done by P.J. Walsh, who did a volume of Cicero that I showed you in the previous video. So I have 3 different translations to choose from. I'll just choose the one which I get along with the most, and then just go from there. And then we have Suetonius' 12 Caesars. So I have, I think, 2 editions of this. I think I have the Oxford, and then I also have the old Robert Graves translation done by Penguin. I'm not entirely sure which ones I should read first, because I heard the Robert Graves translation is good, but it's more Robert Graves than it is Suetonius, or at least he takes a lot of liberties in his translation, and so maybe I should go with the Oxford edition first if I just want to get a more straightforward translation with some notes to it. And then the Robert Graves translation can just be like when I want to reread the work in a different voice. And then of course we have Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Actually, I have an ebook of this as well, if I could find my e-reader. I have an ebook of this. I have 2 actually. I have a very popular work translation of this, but then I also have a less popular one. So the one I like most, and the one I might actually read, is this is the cover of it. It's a nice cover. It's translated by C. Scott Hicks and David V. Hicks. So I guess a brother, Scott and David, and just an edition of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. But then I have another edition of this, which is from Everyman's Library. I'm sure you've seen it before, if you're at all familiar with his work, with the Marcus Aurelius edition. I just want to see if I can find it so that I can tell you the translator here. I'm not finding it. Oh, here it is. Gregory Hayes. Gregory Hayes is the translator. This is the cover here. And so even got a forward by Ryan Holiday. I didn't notice that. That's what it says here. Ryan Holiday, who is the dude bro king of Stoicism, who writes little vacuous works of feel-good Stoicism. So hopefully the translator is a lot more serious than that. And I think that's it for Marcus Aurelius. Then we got Lucian, Selected Dialogues. I have the Penguin edition here as the one to get, but I don't have any copy of Lucian so far. I don't know if I think Lucian does poetry, or what is actually meant by Selected Dialogues. I don't know. I'll have this one as a maybe for now, but I'm pretty sure Lucian is fairly popular, so maybe I should just give Lucian a go. And then I have another volume which doesn't have an author attached to it. It's the Lives of the Later Caesars. I have the Penguin volume of this, and it's like a follow-up to Suetonius, but even less credible, and I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's all that highly regarded as a work of history. But I'm going to read it anyways because I did find a used copy of it, and I think it'll be an interesting counter to Suetonius, so I might as well give it a read. Then we have the Districts of Cato. I don't have a translation labeled here, but I heard that it is quite influential through the Middle Ages. I'm not entirely sure how at this point. Again, I did do the research for all this like 3 years ago. So a lot of my rationale for why I include the Districts of Cato and whether or not I actually need to include it is a little bit beyond me at this point. But once I get to this point in my Western Canon reading list, I'll make sure to dive into it some more and to give some, see if I actually need to do this, need to read this, or why I included it. And then next we have Procopius, who is a famous author for his The Secret History, which is like a secret tell-all against the emperor of his time, the Emperor Justinian, and just telling all sorts of gossip and slander, basically like secretly hating his boss, all the while he was writing actual important state-approved histories of Justinian's period of time in Roman history. So I have here as reading both his Wars of Justinian, which is published in Project Gutenberg in 3 volumes, but then there's also his Secret History, which I have the Penguin Classic for. I don't know if I should read his Wars of Justinian. I don't know how interesting he is as a historian or how influential. So maybe I'll just read 1 volume, or at least try to read 1 volume, and if I like it, then I'll read the others. And then I'll read his Secret History and try to see the counter to that, because I think that'll be a lot of fun. And then I have Diogenes Laertius. So this is separated from Diogenes the Cynic, who I did not include on my list, mostly because we don't have a whole lot that survives from him, and it's just mostly like tales of him just being a disrepute, being a complete jerk in public. But anyways, Diogenes Laertius is a historian of ideas, where his famous book is The Lives of Eminent Philosophers. There is a volume on Project Gutenberg that's available, but I want to read the new translation that it was recently done, which is like, it's a beautiful hardcover. I don't have the edition yet, but it's got like illustrations in it and whatnot. It looks great, and it was just published within the last few years, and it's just him discussing the biography and ideas of ancient philosophers. At least for him, we're not totally ancient yet, but for us are ancient philosophers, and it's usually from Diogenes Laertius that we get so much of our information from these characters, even though Diogenes Laertius is not totally to be trusted, at least his history is not totally trustworthy. And I don't think that's just his fault. It's more just the sources that he had, and what he considered good sources is not what he considered good history is not what we consider good history these days. So, and then at the end of my Latin age, I include 2 anomalies, that didn't know where to put, and so I put them here at the end of the Latin age, because at the end of the Latin age, then we move into the Christian age, and the Latin age here. I wanted to include these works before I got to the Christian age, because they are older than Christianity, but they're very important works in their own right, and they fit more of an Eastern canon, an Eastern canon, but I included them here because they are now currently quite influential in the Western canon as well. So the 2 works are Sun Tzu's Art of War, which is fairly short, just like of aphorisms on war, I think. And then we have Confucius, the Analects, which is, we don't even know if it's by Confucius, I don't think. It's more just writings of Confucius, or followers of Confucius, or whatever. And then just legends of Confucius. But these are like pre-Christian era, or at least from my understanding, very influential works from the Eastern canon that I think would be helpful to include in a Western canon right before I get to the Christian age. So that's why I included them. And I guess another work that I should include here, though I didn't actually type it out here on my list, is the works of Buddha. I have an Oxford edition of, which is like a selected sayings of Buddha or something. I don't have the actual edition here to show you. I wish I did, but it'd make this a lot more interesting than you having to stare at my face and and on my my lack of knowledge here, because I could give you more information on what the work actually is. But I just know that I have an Oxford edition that's called, I think, The Sayings of Buddha or whatever, which is like a small selection of some of the more famous stories and teachings of Buddha. I think that'd be interesting to include here too, because it's as we get into the Western canon, and as Christianity gains dominance, I think it's important just to see religion from the Eastern side of things. And so I do include some Eastern works on my Western canon reading list, and I would like to include these three here. So that's it for the Latin Age. This is part 2. Again, apologies for the break of the 2 videos. If I can edit them together, I'll try to. If not, I'll just publish them as individual videos. This will just be part 2. And we'll see you next time, book 2.